It's not going to storm, I'd told him hours earlier, pulling my hoodie tighter against the chilly night breeze. You're being dramatic. He just smiled in that infuriatingly calm way of his. You say that now. But when your feminist ass gets soaked at 2 a.m., don't come crying to me. I'd scoffed, partly because of the joke, partly because, well, I didn't like how safe I actually felt with him there. That wasn't supposed to happen. I'd spent the last year preaching on every online forum and girls' night that men always had ulterior motives. And Daniel, soft-spoken, polite Daniel, was no exception in my head. I didn't even want him on this camping trip. It was supposed to be a girls-only weekend, me, Kyla, and Jenna. But then Kyla got strep, Jenna flaked for some Tinder date, and somehow, he was the only one left willing to come because he didn't want me camping alone. When the first thunder cracked across the forest, it shook the ground. Then came the wind, sharp, biting, like invisible fingers prying at the tent seams. By 2:30 a.m., it wasn't just rain. It was a storm. Shit, I hissed as the fabric rippled like a sail. Told you, Daniel muttered, but there was no smugness in his voice. He was focused, like someone who'd done this 100 times. He reached for the ropes, his fingers moving fast. The front poles coming loose. Hold that side. I wanted to argue. I really did. But the tent was shuddering and the water pooling around my boots didn't exactly scream I'm independent and thriving. I pressed down on the cold nylon, my hands already numb. Lightning flashed so bright it lit the forest like daylight for half a second, and I saw the look on his face, not fear, not irritation, but concentration. He wasn't trying to be a man or show off. He was trying to keep us safe. Okay, he said over the howl of the storm. Worst case, we bail to the truck. But if the wind shifts east, we should be fine here. I let out a shaky breath. I didn't think it'd get this bad. He glanced up at me then, water dripping down his jawline, hair plastered to his forehead. Yeah, nature doesn't care about what we think. Something about that made me swallow hard. A sudden gust tore through the clearing. The tent shook violently, and the front flap ripped open with a horrible tearing sound. Rain shot in like icy needles, soaking everything in seconds. Get inside the inner compartment, he yelled. He grabbed my wrist, not hard, just firm, and pulled me toward the smaller, insulated section. I wanted to protest, to say I could handle myself, but the storm roared louder than my pride. Inside, the wind was muffled. His flashlight cast a shaky cone of yellow light. I could hear my own heartbeat. This is ridiculous, I whispered, hugging my knees. It's like the apocalypse. He laughed softly. It's just weather, Maya. His ease was infuriating and comforting all at once. My hoodie clung to my skin, heavy with rainwater. He peeled off his jacket and tossed it over me without asking. It was warm, smelled faintly like cedar and detergent. I froze. Why are you giving me this? Because you're shaking, he said simply, adjusting the corner of the tent. And because I'm fine. I wanted to say I didn't need his help. That I didn't owe him anything. That men do things because they want something back. But he'd already turned back to check the seams, making sure no more water got in. No lingering stares. No smug grin. Just help. And in that moment, wrapped in his jacket, hearing the storm rage outside, I felt something uncomfortable and unfamiliar, safety I didn't have to earn or owe for. I sat there for a while, just listening to the storm hammering the outside world. It was strange how the canvas separated chaos from calm. Daniel moved like he'd been in 100 storms before. Me? My legs were shaking so badly I had to bite my lip just to stop my teeth from clattering. You okay? He asked without looking at me. His voice was steady, like a rope you could grab in the middle of a current. I'm fine, I lied. He didn't push. Just nodded, zipped the side flap tighter, and braced one of the poles with his shoulder. His flashlight beam wobbled across the tent walls, making everything feel smaller. Closer. I stared at him through the dim light. Water glistened on his jawline, but he didn't seem bothered. His breathing was even, focused. And for the first time, it occurred to me that this man, this person I'd labeled danger in my head by default, was the only reason this tent hadn't collapsed on me yet. The wind screamed, A tree creaked nearby, and I instinctively flinched closer. I hated that reflex. I hated that part of me wanted to rely on him. I'd built my identity on not needing any man. And now here I was, tucked under his jacket like some scared little bird. He must have noticed me inching closer, because his voice softened. "It's okay, Maya. We're fine." I swallowed hard. This wasn't supposed to happen. What wasn't? I gestured vaguely to the chaos outside. All of this. I wanted to prove I could handle it alone. That I didn't need some guy to protect me. He let out a low laugh, not mocking, more like he understood something I didn't. "Maya, storms don't care if you're a man or a woman." That sentence hit like a quiet truth bomb. I stared at the floor, unsure how to respond. I'd spent months ranting about male privilege, about how men use protector as a cover for control. But this? There was no hidden agenda here. No power play. Just him, soaked to the bone, keeping the tent upright while I sat there wrapped in his jacket. The storm intensified. The thunder was so close now it felt like the ground shuddered with each strike. Daniel leaned forward, pulling the corner of the tarp lower to block incoming spray. His shoulder brushed mine, it wasn't intentional, and somehow that made it feel safer. I whispered without meaning to, "Why are you even here?" He raised an eyebrow. "Because you said you wanted to go camping." Alone. In October. In a forest. With no cell signal. "Yeah, but why you?" His lips curved slightly. "Because you're my friend. And I didn't want you to freeze to death proving a point." I exhaled sharply, part laugh, part disbelief. "You're such an idiot." "Yeah," he chuckled, adjusting the pole again. "But a useful one." Lightning illuminated the inside for a fraction of a second. His silhouette was all sharp edges and quiet strength. I hated how steady he looked. Hated how much I needed that steadiness. I clenched my jaw. "You're not, like, other guys." He gave me a confused look. "What does that even mean?" "You're not creepy. You don't try anything. You don't," I fumbled with the words, cheeks hot even in the cold. "You don't make me feel unsafe." He blinked, then shook his head with a soft laugh. "That's not special, Maya. That's just being a decent person." The bluntness of that made something in my chest twist. He didn't say it like he was asking for a medal. Just stating fact. Outside, the storm roared on. Inside, my worldview was cracking a little at the edges. I'd told myself for so long that men only acted kind when they wanted something. But right now, Daniel wasn't even looking at me that way. His hands were busy, his mind was on survival, and the only thing he'd offered me was warmth. No expectations. "Thanks," I muttered finally. It was small, but it felt like swallowing a boulder. He glanced over. "For what?" "For not being who I thought you'd be." For the first time, he didn't laugh. He just gave a small nod, like he understood exactly what that meant. The tent creaked again. He shifted to sit beside me, shoulders still pressed against the pole to keep it steady. I could feel the shared body heat, the weight of silence between us. And for once, it wasn't uncomfortable. It was grounding. The storm didn't let up for hours. It was the kind of storm that made the world outside feel like it didn't exist anymore, just wind, rain, and darkness pressing in on a small pocket of warmth. The sound of it became a rhythm. Constant. Relentless. At some point, my legs stopped shaking. The jacket Daniel had given me felt heavier now, warmer. I could smell the faint scent of wood smoke clinging to it from earlier in the evening. He must have spent hours chopping wood and building that fire while I'd been scrolling through my phone, convinced I knew better. "You're really not cold?" I asked. He tilted his head, considering. "I've been in worse. Worse than this. Once slept under a tarp in the Rockies," he said casually, as if he were talking about a walk in the park. Snowstorm hit. My beard froze. I stared at him. Why the hell would anyone do that voluntarily? His grin flashed in the dim light. "Because it makes everything else feel easy." I shook my head, half laughing despite myself. "You're insane." "Maybe," he admitted, still smiling. The wind howled again, rattling the stakes. The whole tent leaned just enough to make my stomach drop. I flinched closer without meaning to. His shoulder shifted so I wouldn't have to say anything. Just quietly making space. Not in a way that trapped me. in a way that told me I could lean if I needed to. I don't know when my heart started to calm down. Maybe it was the steadiness of his breathing. Maybe it was the fact that he never once made a move, never once made me feel like I owed him something. That silence, so unlike the world I'd grown used to, was disarming. I glanced at him. Daniel? Yeah. Why are you like this? He raised an eyebrow. Like what? I gestured at him with a vague hand wave. Normal. Nice. Not gross. He laughed, low and warm. That's a weird compliment. It's just, I hesitated, embarrassed at my own words. You know what kind of stuff I say online? Yeah. I've seen your posts. I winced. And you still came? Yeah. Why? He shrugged, still watching the tent wall as if the storm was more important than my emotional crisis. Because I know you. Not the version of you that posts angry stuff. The real you. The one who pretends not to care but still brought extra granola bars for the raccoons. My cheeks heated. I didn't. You did. His grin widened. You're a good person, Maya. Just a loud one. I smacked his arm lightly, but I was laughing. A small, nervous, real laugh. And it felt weirdly good. Then, the wind picked up again, harder this time. One of the tent poles bent with a crack, and the structure dipped like it was bowing to the storm. I froze. But Daniel was already moving. He grabbed his headlamp, strapped it on, and went for the back support line. Wait, what are you doing? I blurted. Fixing it before we collapse, he said calmly. Hold the other end. The canvas whipped against my face as I crawled toward him. I grabbed the cord with numb fingers, pulling it tight while he adjusted the broken section. His hands were quick, sure. I followed his lead, my heartbeat thundering louder than the storm. When he tightened the last knot and sat back down, soaked again from the brief exposure outside, the tent stabilized. My chest ached, not from fear, but something heavier. Something I didn't want to name. You didn't have to do that, I said quietly. Yeah, I did. I looked at him, dripping wet but still calm, and the words tumbled out before I could stop them. I've spent so much time, assuming. He blinked. Assuming what? That guys like you were just waiting. Pretending to care so they could get something out of it. That if I ever showed weakness, it'd be used against me. His expression softened, not pitying, just patient. Not everyone's like that. I know, I whispered, though it felt like the first time I actually believed it. We sat in silence again. But this time, the silence felt different. Not tense. Not forced. Just real. Outside, thunder rolled away into the distance. The storm was beginning to weaken. Inside, the storm in my chest was too. By the time the thunder softened into a low, distant growl, the world had shrunk to the rhythm of raindrops against canvas and the quiet sound of our breathing. My body ached from holding tension for hours. My pride ached even more. Daniel leaned back slightly, stretching his shoulders. His shirt clung to him like a second skin, his hair a wet mess, but he looked completely unfazed, like storms were just background noise to him. I stared at him for a long moment, feeling something I hadn't in years. Not attraction, not fear, just trust. Quiet, unshakable trust. You ever been scared? I asked. He tilted his head, considering the question. Yeah, plenty of times. When? He chuckled softly, rubbing the back of his neck. When my brother and I got lost in the mountains. We were 16. Had no compass, no phone signal. Storm like this hit. We spent 2 nights under a boulder eating beef jerky and praying the snow didn't trap us. I winced. Jesus. Yeah, I thought we were done for. But my brother kept cracking jokes. Said if we died, at least no one would ever have to suffer through his mom's meatloaf again. I laughed unexpectedly. He smiled. It taught me something, he went on. Fear doesn't have to control you. It's just a feeling. You let it sit next to you, acknowledge it, but you don't hand it the steering wheel. I didn't know why, but that hit me harder than it should have. Maybe because I'd spent so much of my life handing my fear the map and calling it empowerment. I swallowed. You know, when Kyla and Jenna bailed, I almost didn't come. He looked over. Why did you? Because I didn't want to look weak, I admitted, heat rising in my cheeks. Because I've spent years telling everyone, myself included, that I don't need anyone. That I can handle everything on my own. And clearly, I gestured at the tent, I can't. He didn't mock me. Didn't say I told you so. He just nodded, like he understood something I didn't have the courage to say out loud yet. That maybe admitting you need help isn't weakness. I used to think men were just waiting for women to fail, I blurted. Like, they were just pretending to be nice so they could gloat later. Or use it. His brows lifted slightly, but he didn't interrupt. But you didn't, I continued. You could have rubbed it in. You didn't. He shrugged. Why would I? Because I hesitated, the words sharp on my tongue. Because I've treated you like a villain in my head for months. He gave a low chuckle. Maya, you're dramatic. But I always knew that. Wow. Thanks, I deadpanned, but it made me smile anyway. His grin softened. I'm not trying to prove anything to you. I just don't like watching people I care about get hurt. The word care sat heavy between us. Not romantic. Just real. Uncomplicated. For the first time, I didn't shrink from it. I adjusted the jacket around me, feeling the warmth soak in again. You know, this is the first time I've been alone with a guy overnight. He raised a brow, pretending to look offended. And how's that working out for you? I'm not dead, I shot back, smirking. High praise, he said with mock solemnity. I laughed. A real, unguarded laugh. The kind I hadn't let out around a guy in years. It felt foreign. Good. I rested my chin on my knees, watching the way the light from his headlamp painted soft gold over the tent fabric. You're kind of ruining my worldview, you know. Good, he said simply. Maybe it needs a little shaking. Silence followed. But it wasn't awkward. It was heavy with the weight of everything I wasn't saying yet. Everything I was finally allowing myself to feel instead of deny. Outside, the rain slowed to a drizzle. The wind quieted. A bird, probably confused by the storm, chirped somewhere in the distance. The worst had passed. I hadn't realized I'd been clutching the edge of my sleeve until I released it. My chest felt different. Lighter. Scared, yes, but not of him. Daniel? I whispered. Yeah, thank you. His smile wasn't loud or showy. It was small, quiet, and completely genuine. Anytime. And for the first time in a long, long time, I believed a man when he said that. The world was still wet and quiet by morning. The storm had washed everything clean, leaves glistened like glass, the forest floor steamed faintly in the pale light, and the birdsong was soft but alive. I blinked awake slowly, still wrapped in his jacket. Daniel was sitting at the tent's opening, legs crossed, hood up, staring out at the mist like he'd been awake for hours. His silhouette was calm. Steady. The same way it had been all night. For a moment, I just watched him. No filters. No theories. No ready-made labels. Just him. Morning, he said without turning around. His voice was low and warm, carrying a softness that melted straight through the thin shield I was trying to rebuild. Hey, I whispered back. He turned slightly and offered me a protein bar like it was the most normal thing in the world. No expectations. No drama. Just here, eat. I took it, unwrapped it with shaky fingers, and stared at the fog curling through the trees. Something about the quiet made everything louder in my head. All night, I'd told myself not to feel it. Not to lean in. Not to let him mean more than he should. But there it was, the way his voice steadied the air around me. The way his presence didn't demand, didn't push, didn't take. And the worst part? The moment I realized how much I trusted him, something inside me cracked. I didn't want this. I didn't want to be that girl who fell for the guy who happened to be kind when the world was falling apart. I didn't want to feel my pulse trip whenever he glanced my way. But I did. I forced myself to sit up straighter, pulling the jacket off like it burned. Thanks for last night, I said, trying to sound casual, unaffected. He didn't miss the forced tone. Of course he didn't. Daniel was frustratingly good at reading people. He just nodded. You don't have to thank me. I do. My voice cracked a little. I misjudged you. He gave a small smile, soft but steady. People misjudge each other all the time. What matters is what we do after. The way he said it made my chest tighten. He wasn't trying to make it romantic. He wasn't trying to use the night as some leverage. He was just being himself. That made it worse. So much worse. I looked away, pretending to fuss with the protein wrapper just so I wouldn't have to meet his eyes. If I did, I wasn't sure what would spill out. He must have seen something in my silence, because after a long moment, he spoke again, gentle, careful. Maya, whatever's going through your head right now, you don't have to explain it to me. I frowned. What do you mean? I mean, he said, leaning back slightly, giving me space like it was the most natural thing in the world. I don't expect anything. I never have. You don't owe me closeness. Or trust. Or anything else. My throat tightened. Why are you like this? He smiled faintly. Because someone should be. He stood up then, stretching, giving me the tent to myself. No pressure. No reaching for me. No subtle moves to close the distance. Just quiet space where my feelings could breathe and ruin me. And it worked. God, it worked too well. Because in that silence, my heart didn't retreat. It ran straight toward him. I wrapped my arms around myself, hating the warmth in my chest, the softness I'd spent years fighting against. My mind whispered all the old warnings. Men always want something. Men will take it if you let them. Don't trust. Don't fall. But Daniel wasn't taking. He was standing a few feet away in damp boots, smiling at the sunrise like nothing had changed, giving me every chance in the world to step back. And that's exactly why I couldn't. I exhaled slowly, shaking my head at the irony. You're impossible, I muttered. He glanced over his shoulder. What? Nothing. He grinned, but didn't press. That restraint, so unassuming, so unlike the stories I'd built in my head, made the ache in my chest unbearable. We packed up slowly, our movements quiet and easy. And even though neither of us said a word about the night before, something between us had shifted, softer, deeper, real. When he held the truck door open for me, I didn't roll my eyes like usual. I didn't lecture him about patriarchal gestures. I just climbed in. My fingers brushed his lightly, and for a second, the world narrowed to that touch. He didn't grab it. He didn't push. He just looked at me like he was saying, "You're allowed to take your time." And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel cornered. I felt free. And that terrified me more than any storm. As the truck rolled down the dirt path, the sun spilled gold through the trees. I caught myself smiling. Quietly. Stupidly. I'd spent years building walls to protect myself from men. But maybe, just maybe, not every man was on the other side of those walls with a sledgehammer. Some, like Daniel, were just waiting outside. Hands in their pockets. Ready to walk away if I told them to. Or stay if I asked. And that was the scariest and most beautiful part of all.